Hey there, horror fans! Welcome to episode 81 of Funny Book Splatter, a horror comics podcast brought to you by HorrorTalk.com. I am your host, James Ferguson. I hope you enjoyed last week's interlude of the first official episode of If You Watch This, I'll Read That. Now we're back to our regularly scheduled programming. This week's guest is Tom Ward, the writer of Merrick, the Sensational Elephantman. This indie darling follows the fictional adventures of the real-life Elephant Man, diving into the supernatural and the occult. The character has even had a crossover with another indie character, Dr. Crowe. Tom is currently running a Kickstarter campaign to fund the release of issues number 7 and 8. You can check out the entire first issue for free on the Kickstarter page before backing the campaign. I've backed it myself, and I encourage you to do the same. Tom can be found online on Twitter as @HighbrowTrash. That is it for the news and updates this week, so let's start right in on episode 81 of Funny Book Splatter with my guest, Tom Ward. Cool. Alright, so to start us off, if you had to describe Merrick to someone, a newcomer or someone on the convention floor, how would you describe the book to them?
Okay, so Merrick the Sensational Elephantman is a fictional retelling of the story of Joseph Merrick, who was a real guy in London in like the late 1800s. So the book's set in 1886. The people, places, years, they're all historically accurate. But then rather than being horrifically disabled as Joseph Merrick the Elephant Man was, he has like the thick, tough skin of an elephant. So then it becomes like a pulp comic book revenge story. And we use that as like a jumping off point to kind of do our own kind of wild version of London.
I'm glad you clarified that it is a real guy, because that's literally what I wrote in a note on here to like ask you about. Real guy? ? So, I guess how much research would you done in maintaining the historical accuracy in terms of like the real places and things that he's done, the people that are in the book?
Yeah, quite a lot. It's kind of the whole thing grew from the research, really. So the concept behind it came to me was kind of, I was just bored thinking about kind of comic book tropes, and you know, the standard superhero thing is like an animal and then man, isn't it? So you've got like Batman, Ant-Man, Hawkman, Animal Man, etc., etc. And then I got thinking about Elephant Man and how that seems like an obvious one. And then obviously I'd heard of the real guy, so I started doing some research, started kind of online. And the more I read about him, the more kind of the book kind of wrote itself. So, for example, the doctor who treats him, Dr. Frederick Treves, he was another real guy. He was the first person to perform an appendectomy. He saved the king's life at the time. He traveled all around the world. He was best friends with Thomas Hardy, who was a poet who was like quite into like the supernatural, ghosts, that kind of thing. And he was a member of the same gentleman's club as Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, who obviously is known for Sherlock Holmes and his writings, and he did a lot of like he proved the guy was innocent as well. He was like a kind of hero in his own right. So the more research I did, like I started getting the books in. So I've read Christine Sparks' The Elephant Man. Sir Frederick Treves had a book called The Elephant Man and Other Reminiscence, and that's got stories of his travels and stories about the Elephant Man. Obviously there's the David Lynch film as well. So I deliberately didn't watch that until after I'd finished writing the first story arc, because I didn't want to kind of subconsciously copy what David Lynch had done in any way. But that was a good watch afterwards that I would recommend.
Cool. I mean, it's really interesting, and what's great is like all the names that you're mentioning, like or in terms of the research, are all folks that end up in the book in some shape or fashion. So they all at least make an appearance or mentioned. So it's clear that you're kind of weaving this story in between the history books.
We're kind of like stepping in between kind of fact and fiction as kind of much as we can. So it's almost like an untold history kind of thing. So it could have happened, but it's kind of been hidden from the public record or whatnot. So we're trying to keep it as based in that as much. It's going to get a lot wilder, but hopefully it'll still be a lot of fun. I went down to London as well, went down to the hospital, and they've got like a little museum in one of the crypts underneath it. You can go and visit that. Yeah, there's lots of there's a replica of Joseph Merrick's skeleton, and lots of medical gear, medical books. There's some letters between Jack the Ripper and and the police at the time are kept in the same place. Really interesting, and it's just quite fun walking around Whitechapel and doing the research. So like we've done a lot of photo references as well. So Luke's actually based as much as he can on what it's really like. So you might even recognise some of the places if you're walking around London, which is quite cool.
Yeah, I can imagine like visiting and seeing like, oh, that's the place from issue 2, and that's this other, from this other scene or something like that, and seeing that in real life has got to be a bit of a trip.
Yeah, exactly. It's fun. It's kind of makes it a bit easier. It's almost a cheat in a way, I think. Like you've already got kind of the aesthetics and a starting point, and it's less coming up with things from scratch, if that makes sense, which is obviously a completely different challenge.
Yeah, but I think that Luke's style certainly adds that kind of like air of mystery and intrigue to it. So it's not just this is an Alex Ross rendition of a location or something.
Yeah, I meant like the writing as well, but yeah, Luke's got a it's very stylized, his style, and he started off great, and he's getting better and better with every issue. I think he's really finding his own feet and adding his own twists to things and finding his own voice. And I think that's something you can only do when you're working on like a long form project. Like you kind of, you know how to deal with the characters, you know how to deal with the locations, so it gives you a bit more to work with. You can kind of experiment a bit more and feel more comfortable. And I think it's definitely showing. Every book he puts out is better than the last one, absolutely.
Yeah, it's awesome to see like the progression overall too. Like just the book gets better with each chapter, I think. Like, and that's both the writing side and the art side. Is like everything gets tighter, the story gets more like just intriguing. Of like, okay, like you're kind of getting an idea of who this person is, and then now at this point, like you're 6 issues in plus the crossover, so you've got a few chapters in there. Where there's, you kind of like, you laid all the ground rules. So now it's like, now you're just kind of running, and it's, seeing all the cool stuff that you can kind of throw in there is really interesting.
Exactly. Like the first 4 issues really kind of set the base, like you say. And now what we're doing is we're kind of playing with all the interesting tropes and all the things that we like about comics and we like in comics that we've read. And we're kind of playing with them in our own sandbox now. Mm-hmm. So like, issue 6, which you've read, is kind of like the classic Fantastic Four. Ben Grimm gets his, he goes back to how he used to look, and then he has the choice at the end whether he's going to save his friends and become the Thing again. And it's all that kind of stuff where we've done the crossover with Corey. It's just going through like a big checklist of stuff we love about comics and doing it our own way in our own book now. So it's super fun.
Yeah, I mean it looks it. The crossover is something that's really cool. So you did a crossover issue with Dr. Crowe, with Corey Freya.
Corey Freya, I think.
Freya? Yeah. See, this is why I asked people how to pronounce their name beforehand. So that's like you don't see that too often in indie comics, particularly. I mean, you see it less often now in terms of like the larger publishers, although they're getting a little bit better. But how does something like that come about? Was that like, hey, you've got chocolate, I've got peanut butter, let's put this thing together?
Pretty much. Obviously, we've been playing around in the same kind of time period, the same kind of pulpy feel of the book. So Corey kind of just got in touch, and obviously I'd seen Dr. Crowe, and he was a fan of Merrick, and he was like, we should definitely do like a crossover at some point. And I was like, yeah, that sounds good, but I want to make sure like we do it right. Do you know what I mean? Like a lot of crossovers is just kind of for the sake of doing it, and it doesn't add to anything, and it feels like a bit of a cash in. But like this, I think we really successfully kind of weaved it into the stories of both characters, so it stands alone by itself, but introduces each character to someone who maybe hasn't read either or neither of them, basically. It just came out so much better than I possibly could have imagined. Really, really happy with that one.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like you have a good pace with it, because you've done 6 issues through Kickstarter plus the collected edition, and then your next Kickstarter is going to be for is that 7 or 8 issue 7 and 8?
7 and 8. So that'll be the 3rd story arc, which will be a 2-parter. And yeah, that's the story arc's called Monsters. So the theme of it is monsters, and it's going to be the Elephant Man. He's going to be fighting kind of like a big cool monster in each issue. So the first one is like a giant maggot god, and the second one he's going to be fighting the man elephant, which is kind of, you know, like a kind of twisted version of himself kind of thing, you know, like the classic doppelganger gone bad kind of comic thing. So that's going to be really fun. It's a 2-issue arc, but each issue is going to also be quite contained, and there's going to be a pretty big twist in issue 8 as well that's going to come back from the start of the whole thing. So really excited for that.
Cool. Like, yeah, it seems like each chapter is pretty accessible from like anybody. So like you could jump in the crossover especially, but like it seems like you can kind of jump into the second arc, but you'll have more appreciation for the overall story if you jump in right from the beginning. You seem to have made it pretty easy for folks to catch up.
Yeah, it's something very deliberate to do, like a solid jumping on point. With that, like every issue I think you should be able to catch up, but certainly every story arc, because every time I go to Kickstarter it's for the next story arc, so it's not necessarily mandatory for everyone to have to read the whole backstory. I think it's important that people can kind of just get involved, and if they like it, they can go back and see more, but they can kind of just move forward, because that was a great thing about like the classic comics was, you know, you could pick up an issue of Spider-Man and start anywhere, and it's almost part of the fun of it is kind of getting glimpses of the backstory, but not necessarily knowing it all inside and out. And a lot of stuff these days, it's very much start at the beginning and work your way through. So we wanted to do something where you could just dip in, you could dip out, you could just pick up any issue, and it would be quite fun by itself and make sense. It wouldn't be like, you know, kind of muddied down with its own kind of history and its own backstories and that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's tough now with publishers to, you know, on one hand you want to start at the beginning, but on the other hand they keep rebooting stuff, at least in the big 2 publishers, so it's tough to kind of like know, is this the right time to jump in, or should I jump in, you know, two reboots ago, or how does that set up? And then it just gets complicated. But with indie books, at least, it's easy to kind of like, oh, okay, this is the picture. I can catch up by doing X, Y, and Z, and I'm all set.
Exactly, yeah. I think like the old classic characters as well, you just need like a small description and you can kind of jump in on the action. It's like, who's Spider-Man? And there's always that caption box on the first page, isn't there? Peter Parker was bitten by a radioactive spider, and then his uncle died, and he learned with great power comes great responsibility. So now he's Spider-Man and he does stuff. And that's kind of, you know, what we wanted to go for. Just, you can get in, you can get caught up with like one caption box for all that's really necessary, and then kind of just enjoy the kind of action, enjoy the adventure.
And I think that caption box is something that is underappreciated in modern day comics. Even in like smaller, like, you know, stuff from Image and stuff like that, it is incredibly helpful just to like catch up, because if there's a delay or something like that in between books, like, all right, I don't remember what that was about or who that guy was or something like that. That way it's just like, here's a quick rundown as to like where people were, even if it is only like a couple sentences, because I was like, all right, you jog my memory, I'm back, I'm all set, let's do it.
Yeah, you're boiling the character down and boiling the story down to like a sentence, 2 sentences, just to its most condensed form to get people back on board and ready for what's coming. Because otherwise you can really just be thrown in the deep end sometimes, and it's not great, especially for new readers.
Well, was Spider-Man? You mentioned Spider-Man. I mean, was that one of like your like kind of gateway drug into comics?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think coming from the UK, I think the American stuff, especially in the 80s when I was growing up, was a little harder to get. There was like a small news agent that had some Spider-Man books, but I mainly started off on Tintin and Asterix, those European annuals, like the library was full of them. And then the Beano and the Dandy, which are kind of like kids kind of comedy comics that we have over here. They're weekly kind of anthology books. But then, was a big fan of Spider-Man. Obviously, you know, Batman, like kind of all the kind of obvious classics. And then went off it for a few years, and then kind of got back into stuff with, you know, your Hellblazers and your Preachers and that kind of thing. And now I just read a lot of Image stuff Pretty much.
You and everybody else. That's
Yeah, well, yeah. The superheroes was just getting a bit too much, so I just kind of, I've got a very kind of obsessive compulsive kind of personality. So if there's huge backstories and big spin-offs, I just want to read it all, and it just takes too much time. So I'm really appreciating the kind of linear nature of a lot of Image books at the minute. So you can just kind of start and then go to the end, and it's a bit more relaxed. Yeah,
it's they have made it a lot easier. Like that's why like there's this awesome kind of setup outside of the big two that I feel like that's also underappreciated, where people are just like, well, it's getting better now because you could dive into like a 5-issue miniseries, get like a terrific story that is unlike anything else you're going to see, and not have to delve through 75 years worth of continuity and understand like wasn't that guy dead, or where did that guy come from, or anything like that.
Absolutely, yeah. It's I think TV is going to go more that way as well. Like you say, I think like one of the great things about comics is like the self-contained miniseries, where stuff doesn't have to go on forever. So you've got the kind of solid start, middle, and end. And I think a lot of people are kind of taking notice of that and working that into things as well. And I think that's really good.
Yeah, and plus that, I mean, on the TV side of it seems like that can be an easier sell of like, all right, we want to do this and we're going to need a whole bunch of money to make each episode of this, but it's only going to be 6, 8, 10 episodes long, and then the whole thing will end, and that's that. But the other side of it is like, we get real greedy on the in the TV business, it seems, where it's like, well, no, can you do this again or make this 20 episodes and stretch this thing out, but then you end up with stuff like Lost, which just gets complicated.
Yeah, absolutely. 23 episodes for 10 seasons is too much for anyone.
No, I get a real kind of Hellboy vibe from Merrick in terms of the setup for it, and definitely with Luke's art. Is that an influence that goes into the book?
Obviously for Luke's a huge Mike Mignola fan, obviously. I hadn't read Hellboy or anything before previously working with him, but we did have kind of like a shared kind of, our crossover is an issue of Legends of the Dark Knight. I think it's number 54, and that's it's a one-shot Batman story by Dan Raspler, and Mike Mignola did the art, and it's Batman's kind of trying to solve like a Victorian murder, and it's a really great comic. In fact, the one shot we did, The Tree of a Restless Night, the cover is a homage to it. But it's one of my personal favorite single issues, and I would highly recommend anyone who's into like Mike Mignola style art or kind of Victorian pulp comics, or even Batman, just to check that one issue out. If I'm sure you can get it on Comixology really easily. It's a really great comic. I think it must be like mid-90s, early 90s, but it's a great one.
Cool. Yeah, it's a good feel in that, like, I think it helps with the tone and the pacing to it. It's not like, oh, this guy's ripping off Hellboy or Mignola or anything. It's more of just like using some of the tropes that he seems to have like kind of defined in some instances, like especially like focusing on like specific little details in a panel or something. Like here's a small panel of just like a creepy ass gargoyle or something like that will pop up, and saying like, oh, like that just gives you the mood that you're in for a particular scene.
Yeah, so when we were first kind of collaborating, Luke was like, yeah, I really like doing that kind of thing, putting like little inset panels and strange little details. And I thought that was really cool, but we kind of thought I was trying to write as much as I can of this into the script. So if you look at like the first issue of Merrick, there's a bunch of like seemingly unrelated kind of objects kind of placed through the issue. And if you're paying attention in the very final panel, in like the reveal, they're all on a table, and it's kind of the inference is that this is kind of like part of like a spell. So everything that we put in, we try and put like details in to, things aren't necessarily just like there because they're cool. We kind of try and put thought into everything, so everything should really be happening and seen for a reason, as much as we can. Obviously there's, you know, times when you can't do that, but like, yeah, we have a real attention to detail. So if Luke wants to do something, I'll try and work that into like the script, and we'll try and have reasons for everything. So, yeah, it's a really good atmospheric thing to do, and hopefully it adds a little thing for people rereading the book, or people who are taking a bit more time and, you know, looking at the pages a bit closer and putting a bit more work into it. Almost, is like, hopefully there's a bit of a reward for that.
I'm impressed by how like meticulously planned this book seems to be. Like, between the research that you did to get the historical accuracy down, and then all these details that go into the plotting and artwork there to say, okay, like, you know, make sure all these pieces go together. That's a lot of time and thought, clearly, that's been put into planning it out and getting the story just right.
It's probably a not great level of perfectionism, to be honest. It's like probably not too healthy. But yeah, we I know a lot of people kind of write comics kind of issue to issue, but we don't start the art until like the whole story arc's kind of written, because we'll often go back and, you know, maybe something will come up in dialogue or something that was maybe a bit left field, and then we think, oh, you know what, it'd be great, we could tie that into something 3 issues earlier. And we'll go back and really tighten the whole thing up. It's really worked on non-chronologically, so we can do that. It's built up as a sketch and then as a whole. So it's not just a case of one issue gets finished, then the next one's happening. Like, the story's thought of as a whole from the start. So when we finish it, we'll go back and we'll change it, and we'll mold the whole thing, and hopefully it shows, really.
Well, that explains how your next Kickstarter campaign is going to be for 2 issues at once, then, right? Like, is like that much artwork all done and everything and ready to go?
There's no artwork started on it. The scripts are all finished. Our editor Claire will be going over it one more time, and then we'll have a few pages ready for the campaign. Like, I pay Luke a page rate to do the book, so the Kickstarter is really a necessity to be able to kind of pay Luke, pay Mika to do the letters, and get the printing done and post it out. So yeah, we're really lucky, and we had loads of backers and a lot of support and a lot of people that come back. So hopefully keep kind of growing as we have been, and keep doing more and more. Because obviously every time we do a Kickstarter, it's not just for 2 books. It's to fund the 2 books, but you can get, you know, there's like 9 books that you can get, kind of thing. So it's kind of growing organically every time as well.
You got the back catalog now that folks can do that, and that should help from for any newcomers that pop in. Now they have a lot more to back, and in order to catch up and get the full story.
Exactly, and we try and keep it. We can't try and keep prices like down as much as we can. Like the digital comics, £1 each, which is I think just over $1 at the minute, and you can get the paperback for £10, which is kind of on par with, you know, the Image Nice price, where they have the discounted first volume. So we're trying to kind of keep up with that, and we do have a really nice kind of print quality. It was something that we felt quite passionately about. So we've got like kind of really thick kind of textured paper in the single issues, which is slightly different to the collected edition as well. So it's it kind of makes the single issues something kind of nice to keep, and a bit more substantial than your kind of average big 2 floppy comic.
So it sounds like your experience with Kickstarter so far has been pretty positive. Like, you've come back to the platform again and again to fund the release of each issue. Has there been any like one thing that you've learned that was like, oh, if only I had known this when I did the first Merrick?
There's probably a couple. So we print our comics standard US size, so that's the same as any kind of Marvel, DC, Image, Dark Horse book. But however, there is something called UK size, which is slightly smaller. And because of the way the printing presses are set up, you can get a lot more books for your money, if you just print it a little bit smaller. So I probably would have done that if I'd have known. And also we did our single issues. The print runs are limited edition, numbered out of 500. which seemed like a really good idea because it added a kind of collectability and, it was something extra for the backers. We said we wouldn't print them again. So it's almost adds value because of the scarcity. So I think someone messaged me earlier today on Twitter and said, there's people trying to sell the first issue for like £20 now. So obviously people feel like it's gone up in value. Unfortunately, it means I sold out of issue 1 a long time ago. So I've got some boxes of like, I've got about 70 copies of issue 2 and a few more issue 3, a few more issue 4. So I do have a fair few boxes of comics about. And obviously once you've got the paperback edition, that's a lot easier to sell at conventions. So that sells a lot faster than the single issues now, which means they're taking up quite a lot of space. But it's okay.
Yeah, it could be a lot worse. I mean, they're comics at the end of the day, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, and they do move. It's just a matter of time. Like, with every Kickstarter and every convention, like, we're kind of getting rid of our backlog of stuff, which makes space and gives us money to put into new issues, basically.
How long do you have the show? How long do you have the comic planned out for? So now we're getting ready for the third arc, issue 8. How long is this wild ride with Merrick going to go?
So I don't know exactly how long it would be, but from the very start, I've had like a beginning, a middle, and an end kind of point in my head. So I know how the story finishes, but what's in between is quite indeterminate. So it could be longer, it could be shorter. So as long as it's going well and there's more ideas, it will kind of stretch out, if that makes sense. So there's a couple of like real turning points and a couple of markers that I kind of know that are definitely going to happen. So like maybe 4 or 5 more story arcs. But while it's going well and, I'm getting new ideas all the time, there's plenty of space in between those things to really flesh it out and do more and more and more with it. So I think a couple of people have got in touch about doing some more crossovers, and there's a couple of like other little spin-off one-shots I've got ideas for. So really, I'd really like it to be a kind of long-running, kind of ongoing series, kind of, in the realms of like Invincible or Why the Last Man, something like that. So there'd be a real bulk collection to it by the end. A couple of big hardback editions would be really nice. Getting to the issue 100 would be amazing. Like, I'm really excited to get to like double digits. If we get to issue 10, I'll be over the moon. But if we could get to 100 issues, like, that would be pretty special. I think I'd be really excited about that.
And it's like practically unheard of in the indie space, let alone Kickstarter. But I mean, it's a great setting, and it sounds like you have the wherewithal and the like energy to do it. It's just a matter of time and money.
Well, Dave Sim's got I think 300 issues of Cerebus, so that's kind of, I've got my eye on that. That's what we're heading towards.
That, like Savage Dragon and Spawn are kind of like the only other like ones that are still standing.
Yeah, Spawn must be well into 100
they're like
now.
2 or I think they're probably closing in on 300 if I remember correctly. But it's it's ebbed and flowed over there.
It shows that like you can do it like an independent thing. Obviously, I know Spawn and Savage Dragon are huge in their own right, but at the time when they came out, I don't think anyone expected them to have the longevity that they've had.
It's incredible.
When those guys started Image.
So is that, you mentioned you're primarily reading Image. Are there any other books that are like popping out that are coming out now that you're like, oh, this is the stuff that's on my radar. This is what people should be checking out?
The stuff I'm reading at the minute, really into, I love Saga. Everyone loves Saga though. The Black Monday, the Black Monday Murders. Have you read that? That's a great book. It's like Seven with the stock market.
And talk about planning. Like, that's a Jonathan Hickman joint. So that guy, like, the stuff that is going into that and the thought process and I think he's the kind of writer that will just like fill notebooks about each and every story to make sure like here's all the information. This is the entire lore for every single thing.
Absolutely. And you look at that book and it's almost like there's like codes and puzzles hidden through it. Like I've read it a couple of times, but I really want to go through it more, maybe with like a pad and paper, because like you get the feeling there's so many details hidden in it, and it's telling you more than you kind of get in that first read. So yeah, I really love the level of detail in that book. I mean, I'm reading, obviously I got quite a lot of stuff through from Kickstarter as well. So, Ken Reynolds does a book called Cognition that I'm a big fan of. That's really good. Ryan K. Lindsay's doing really good stuff at the minute as well. He's just putting out more and more books all the time. And Fraser Campbell is doing a book called Alex Automatic, which is like a 60s, 70s kind of psychedelic spy thriller. It's that's a pretty interesting one worth checking out as well. At the minute. And then I just read a lot of old stuff as well. Just The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen by Alan Moore. Huge fan of that, reading that again. I've just finished reading I started reading, what's it called? Shade the Changing Man for the first time. Really, really enjoying that. I've not read that before, and it's really good. I would highly recommend that to anyone as well.
Yeah, it's amazing how much is out there. Like, and every so often I'll hear about a book like, oh, we're gonna re-release this other thing, and I'm like, where did that even come from? Like, I've never even heard of this one, but now like I have to read this. Like, how did this just like pass me by?
Yeah, there's so much. I think there's a real kind of invigoration in comics at the minute. Like, Kickstarter has made it easier than ever to kind of get an audience and make funding a book possible. And along with like digital comics, Comixology, it's never been a better time to get new people to read books as well. Like what we did with our first issue, we just gave it away for free, which I think was a real help with the first Kickstarter, because it meant rather than just checking out a couple of pages and thinking the art looks cool, maybe the book will be okay, it gave them a chance to read a whole issue and think, yeah, I like this. I'm interested in seeing more of it. So, yeah, I would put our success down to that, basically, getting as many people to read a free online comic as possible.
Yeah, it's funny, like the difference that it makes when you give out the first taste is free, so it's like, hey, if this is out here, try this out. It kind of gives the reader a like, it shows how confident you are in the book. It's like, well, here's this, but like, sooner or later I'm going to call on you to like check out, I'll need something to get the next one out there.
Yeah, I think it's a lot easier to engage people when you're saying, here's a free comic, check it out, than it is to say, we need money to make a comic. And I think that's the two kind of, when you look at Kickstarter, there's the two different ways people are doing it. There's like the people who are like, I need money to make this thing that I want to do, or there's people who are like, we've made this cool thing, check it out if you want to see more of it, like, or if you want to help make it possible, like, it'd be great if you were involved. And yeah, I think kind of interacting with people that way is definitely a really positive way to do it.
Yeah, and Kickstarter's turned into like a whole community now in and of itself, and that people will scroll through Kickstarter looking for books or looking for new comics and stuff like that, and then and you end up building this like whole other fan base there.
Absolutely, there's definitely a huge comic community on Kickstarter who are looking for books that aren't necessarily being made anywhere else. So they are just browsing through, looking for cool stuff to get involved with. And I think a lot of people enjoy kind of seeing the process as well. So they like following the updates and seeing the pencil pages come in, or see the creators talking about how they're doing things or why they're doing things. And it definitely builds like a community feel. Like Corey obviously kind of got in touch with us, and we did the crossover on Kickstarter, and he's going back to do the Dr. Crowe collected edition on there, and hopefully kind of the people who've checked this out, we'll check his next book out. And there's creators who are like, you're not stuck to what might sell in the shop, or what an editor wants you to do, or what a publisher wants you to do. You really do have the freedom to do anything you want. Like, we don't stick to kind of the regular page counts as like other comics do. Like, some of the issues of Merrick are like 32 pages, some of them are 22. Like, we can do whatever we need to fit the story and what we think we want to do for each project, rather than being like, you're putting a 22 page book out every month and either having filling pages or missing things out. So it really does offer you like a freedom to do things a little bit differently.
Yeah, and that's the joy of the indie process. It's one of the benefits, but sometimes, yeah, it becomes it can be unpredictable, and there's still pitfalls to it. But at the end of the day, you're making comics. Like it's fun and enjoyable in that regard.
yeah, and then you have to pack up about 500 books and post them out at the post office. It is always a special part of the campaign at the end of every one. But yeah, it's really great. There's nothing better than when people's books start arriving and they'll send you a picture of it on Twitter or tag you on Instagram or something and be genuinely excited that this book that they've been looking forward to has arrived on their doorstep and they're excited to read it. Like, it is really cool.
Yeah. Now, going back to Merrick in terms of the story and where we're going next, so you already mentioned a couple of monsters that he's going to be fighting in upcoming issues. I mean, are there other ones you have your sight set on, or are they ones that are pulled from myth or legend, or are they like some classic monsters? Because I know you have Spring-Heeled Jack in one in one other story arc, which is a character is a something from folklore I had no idea about, and then all of a sudden like 5 different stories were revolving around Spring-Heeled Jack. Like it was like all of a sudden, like it was like something that and the Krampus. That was the other thing that had popped up everywhere else. Like where all of a sudden someone like found this on Wikipedia or something and said, "Oh my god, let's talk about the Krampus." And then every other story or movie that came out had the Krampus. Spring-Heeled Jack seemed to spring onto the stage not that long ago of like, here's a bunch of crazy shit that like this mystery that was out there.
Yeah, I think Spring-Heeled Jack must be a very kind of British thing. I didn't even really consider that it hadn't made its way over to America, because there's obviously the Wikipedia page on Spring-Heeled Jack's a really interesting read. Like they reckon it was like a case of mass hysteria. There was sightings all over the country. And the thing with Spring-Heeled Jack as well was he was featured in a lot of the Penny Dreadfuls of the time, which were kind of like the pulps and like predated the comics and the pulps. So it was a lot of fun to kind of get him involved in our kind of Victorian Penny Dreadful era comic. But yeah, he's going to be a recurring character, and probably in the next, possibly the following story arc or the one after that, we're going to start doing different locations. So there's going to be Merrick's going to go on a trip around Europe, and we're going to deal with kind of the Golem of Prague. There's going to be some vampires at some point. A lot of the kind of, the classic classic monsters. When you think of the monsters, we're going to be dealing with a lot of that. And then there's some kind of like the monster from issue 7 is kind of got a bit of a H.P. Lovecraft vibe to it. So there's going to be some more of that kind of thing as well. But like, yeah, we're literally just playing with anything that we think's fun. So if Luke sends me a message one day and he goes, "Oh, you know what, I'm really into manticores or something," I'll be like, "Okay, cool. Like, we'll see if we can work this in at some point." And like, if he thinks it's fun to draw, we'll probably have a go at doing it. 'Cause obviously he draws really cool monsters. But yeah, so there's going to be more like kind of, it's not all just going to be big monsters and stuff. We're going to have kind of a more human element as well. So there's lots of stuff we're going to be playing with coming up. And a lot of stuff, we're playing with the classic tropes. So if you read the comic and think this would be cool in it, it's probably going to be in it at some point. It's very much, we're kind of wearing our influences on our sleeve and playing with it with as much fun as we can, basically.
That's the best thing you could do. Like, and that's like, you're doing what you want, you're doing what you love. It sounds, and I love the idea that Luke could just be, I don't know, I want to draw a centaur, and you're like, I'll figure it out. Like, let me see what we could do. We could figure, if we can get an arc where you could fight a centaur or something, like, and that's an awesome collaborative relationship, because that way, like, you're not just like giving him stuff that he hates to draw or that he's like indifferent to, but he's like, I want to get in and be able to play around with these kind of monsters or creatures, and that's the kind of stuff that you can weave into the story in some shape or fashion.
Absolutely. And when your artist's having fun with what he's drawing, you're obviously going to get the best work out of them. Like, if you're just boring your artist month after month, like, you're gonna have a book that looks boring. Like I want everyone involved to be excited about it. Not to say that I haven't made some pretty harsh requests on Luke, like in the in the Treves one shot when it's like, oh, he's attacked by like 200 rats. Like that's the kind of panel description that I imagine all comic artists dread. But sometimes you just have to go down that route as well. But like, yeah, if he wants to draw things, it's a challenge to look at like a blank page of script. So if he has like an idea or something cool, it's like, that's like a challenge for me to make that work. Which is kind of like, it's making you better as a writer as well. When you don't have free reign, you've kind of got a couple of points that you've got to work in between. And I think both of us are still getting better. The art's getting better. And I think personally, my writing's getting better as well. So between that, it means we're putting out a really quality book, I think.
Yeah. And that's part of, what's the challenge there is that, well, that can often lead to better stories and better comics in general. If like, to compare it to something like Robert Rodriguez, the director, when he made his first movie, El Mariachi, he looked around and he was like, all right, I got a guitar case, a leather jacket and a turtle. Like, what can I do to put all this stuff together? And then he just kind of, he was able to weave all that stuff into a story and make it work. And the same thing can be true then for comics. If you're like, all right, if my collaborator wants to put something like this into the book, you have to find a way to weave that into the story, make it work with everything. I mean, obviously you don't have to, but like, I'm sure he would appreciate it, and having that kind of relationship is helpful in that regard.
Yeah, it means you're both flexing your creative muscles, which it means you're both going to get better. Like, if I challenge him, like he'll draw it and he'll be a better artist for it. If he challenges me, I'll figure out a way to write it. And having to do that, I'll become a better writer. So if everyone's just playing it safe all the time, you never really come out of your comfort zone. You're never really going to get much better. It's like, it's with anything. If you get outside your comfort zone, that's when you're going to see something a bit different happen.
Yeah. Those are very wise words there. Is there anything that folks should look out for with the new Kickstarter campaign? Like, you have anything, any additional stuff planned or anything, or is that stuff we should keep on the wraps?
Well, it's going to be running over the kind of UK convention kind of season. So I'm going to be at NiceCon in Bedford, and that's the 1st and 2nd of September. And then in September, I'll also be at Thought Bubble in Leeds, which is one of the biggest kind of comic festivals in the UK. And then at the beginning of October, I'll be at the Lakes International Sequential Art Festival in Kendal. So, I'll be there. If anyone who's listening wants to talk about comics or Kickstarter, you can come up and have a word there and talk about it. And hopefully we'll be funded before the kind of end of it. And as always, you can always download the first issue of the comic at www.merrickcomic.co.uk, which is something we always kind of push, so people can check out the book and see what they think before they pledge.
Yeah, and that's a great way to get your feet wet a little bit and check it out beforehand. But like we said, the first taste is free. I've backed a number of the previous Merrick Kickstarters, including the most recent one with the crossover. So looking forward to the next chapters here in this crazy life of Merrick. It's interesting because I love the this kind of like new genre that seems to have developed over the past few years of like historical fiction, of taking something like and making it, especially if they add a supernatural element to it, like Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter, like, all right, I didn't expect that, but okay. And you took a man from history that had a horrible disease of some kind that is still not fully known what happened, and he was treated like a freak and a monster for his life, and you turn him into a superhero, and that's a pretty noble endeavor that has turned into a pretty cool comic with all kinds of crazy shit in it. So with monsters and supernatural elements and stuff like that, like, yeah, it's a win-win all around here.
Thanks very much. I'm glad you enjoy it. It's one of them, like, history is like, it's super interesting. Like, the world's been full of super interesting people that, the average person hasn't heard of. Like, there's crazy wild places. There's people who've had some absolutely insane theories on how stuff works and just their general way of thinking. And like it's just there to be plundered, basically, isn't it? Everyone loves the kind of atmosphere, I think. Like, I'm a big fan of the kind of, the 1880s kind of atmosphere, like the shadows and the kind of almost lawlessness to everything. I think it makes for a really cool comic, basically.
Yeah. And aside from the Kickstarter, which we'll link in the show notes, and the Merrick comic website where you can get the first issue for free, are there any other places that folks can find you online?
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at highbrowtrash, and Luke's is also at Art of Parker. So if you want to follow us and find out more about stuff, by all means, or if you've got any questions about kind of making comics or the Kickstarter process, get in touch and be happy to talk to you about that. And yeah, there's the Kickstarter and the website, which is www.merrickcomic.co.uk, which is our online store. And if you just want to pick up a couple of issues of the comic or the collected edition, or we got some t-shirts and prints and stuff, you can do that there, and you can download the first issue for free there as well. So I think that's about it. Yeah.
All right, Tom, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me. This is I love getting a peek behind the making of comics that I've been following for a bit, especially ones on Kickstarter. So this is a fun chat. And like I said, I'm looking forward to the next chapters here and where Merrick goes.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, man. Appreciate it.
So that wraps it up then for this episode of Funny Book Splatter. I have been James Ferguson with my guest Tom Ward. You've been listening to Funny Book Splatter, a horror comics podcast brought to you by HorrorTalk.com. We've been bringing you the best in horror since 2002. In addition to comics, we cover movies, TV shows, books, and video games. We've got news, reviews, guest features, interviews, unboxing videos, and much more. Be sure to sign up to Steve's Deals newsletter to increase your horror collection without breaking the bank. Check us out at HorrorTalk.com and at HorrorTalk on Twitter.